before, and you mentioned the buffer stock. You have a very interesting idea that you've advocated for a number of years now, the so-called job guarantee program. Other people have called it government as employer of last resort. But it turns the idea of a gold stock buffer into something different. You use employment effectively, or employed people or unemployed people as a buffer stock. Do you want to explain that a little bit further?
Sure. It goes back for me to 1978. I was sitting in an agricultural economics class in my fourth year at Melbourne University, and Australia at that time had a wool price stabilisation scheme, and this was a sop to the very powerful rural lobby, and rural lobbies are powerful everywhere, and no place more than in Europe, for example, which is a lot of the problem. And the scheme worked by to provide a guaranteed income to wool providers, so that the fluctuations of the wool cycle wouldn't damage their annual incomes.
So the government would step in and support the price of wool at a certain point.
They'd agree at what price they would support, and if the harvest was very good in 1 year, if the crop what do they call them? The clip was very good 1 year, and the market was flooded with wool. Well, then the government would buy all that wool, and because that would stabilise the price and
stabilise the incomes of the farmers.
Yeah, the income of the farmers would be stabilised, and around Australian cities there were these big red brick buildings everywhere with big warehouses, and they were the wool stores. And we used to go by in the car and say, and our parents would say, "That's the wool store." And of course, when the clip was poor, and the government would sell the stuff out of their wool stores
to prevent some kind of inflationary
and
shock.
so to stabilise the price. And at that time, I wasn't very interested in wool, but unemployment was starting to rise in the late 70s in Australia. The Australian government, like most of the Western governments, handled the first oil price shock very poorly, and unemployment rose from its full employment level for the first time. It's never got back there, but at that time I was more concerned. That was the reason I was studying economics, because I was concerned about unemployment. And I thought, well, this is a full employment of wool scheme, this price stabilisation scheme. It made sure that all wool would always be demanded. And of course, a bit of lateral thinking then says that, well, the government can do that with employment, so that if there's too much labour without a job, that is unemployment, the government can buy all that stock up and at a fixed price.
In effect, maintaining a stockpile of quote-unquote shovel-ready labour that can be drawn back into the private sector as the private sector transitions back.
We've probably gone beyond shovels now in 2014, but a pool of labour, the government can buy it, and when the private sector resumes its strength after a downturn, then because it's been at a fixed price, and you would set the price at the bottom of the private sector wage structure, so you don't interfere with that, the private sector can then buy that labour back any time it wants, if it offers the right terms and conditions. And that overcomes a whole series of problems. Unemployment is the worst evil or cost, or whatever word you want to use, that we can think of. The modern economist is obsessed with what we call microeconomic inefficiencies. Structural reforms is all about minuscule little improvements in transport systems and what have you, but the daily cost of unemployment dwarfs all of those things. And I remember there was a quote from James Tobin, if I recall correctly. He said, "How many Harburger triangles," which for non-economists is this little measure in a graph of the microeconomic inefficiency, how many of them can you fit into an Oaken gap, which was named after Oaken, and that was the sort of loss of output per percentage rise in unemployment? And the answer, of course, is heaps. And so it addresses that problem that workers are never in a non-productive situation. And one of the problems of unemployment, of course, is that workers lose slowly but surely they become dislocated, and they start losing their general skills and also their specific skills. And so these sort of job guarantee schemes stops all of that happening, provides steady income support, and most importantly, it fixes the minimum amount that the deficit has to rise by when there's a downturn to stimulate employment. It sets a boundary because when do you know that the government's has spent enough? When the last worker has walked into the job guarantee office to pick up a job.
Yeah, and the point is, the argument is, well, we don't want to give people free lunches. And of course, what I've always said about the job guarantee is, no, we want people to be able to pay for their lunches, and that's what the job guarantee actually does. So.
Well, look, if you think about what we tolerate now, so let's go to Greece. We've got 60% of the 15 to 24-year-olds unemployed. That's your future generation of workers. They've now been unemployed, for some of them probably for 6 or 7 years already. We've got unemployment rates all around the world of, into double digits. In Europe, it's 10.8 or something at the moment percent. That's a drastic waste of human potential. Even if you take a hard line and just worry about sort of economic things, income losses, that's a dramatic daily loss of income that could be produced. And then if you add the things that psychologists and health professionals and sociologists worry about, and that is mental health and family breakdown and alcohol and substance abuse and all of the other pathologies that are the personal and family and community pathologies that are outside just the loss of income. It's a dramatic loss. So any system that was different to that would, it doesn't take a genius to invent a system that would be better than that. Mm-hmm. And for people who want to hang on to that system as if it's the Tina, there's no alternative, that's just untrue. Even if all of these job guarantee workers just turned up in the morning, dug a hole through the day, and an engineer could calibrate how long it would dig and then how long it would take to fill in again. Even if they just did that, it would be better than the system we've got now. But our research has shown that there's a multitude of productive activities that can be done by that workforce that would be oriented to meeting unmet community and environmental care needs. And so it's not just a matter of digging holes and filling them in again, the old sort of boondoggles.
It's a matter of political will, actually. And one hopes that eventually that the governments will see the wisdom of that approach.
I mean, one of the things that modern monetary theory emphasises, at least the way I talk about it, which reflects my background and where I came into economics, is that the government always chooses the unemployment rate. I do work in less developed countries as a development economist, and I'm always being met by bureaucrats and IMF type officials who start off the meeting saying that unemployment, this is a highly complex, multi-layered, deep problem. And I say, no, it's not. The government chooses the unemployment rate. You could employ all those people within about a week.